Hey everybody, a couple things before we get to this episode. First thing, thank you so much for listening to the Whatcast. We've received a lot of nice iTunes reviews lately. You guys are sharing the show and telling your friends about it, and that's basically the only way the show grows. We're not part of any podcast network, we really don't have any sponsors, and we don't take part in that fake bullshit of buying social media followers. You guys know what I'm talking about. You see a podcast that's on episode 6, they put one out a month, and they've got 25,000 followers. That's called paying for that shit. All the support we receive from you guys is real, and we know that, and that's why we continue to do the show, so thank you very much. Secondly, we ran into a couple issues putting out this episode. The way it works is, the publishing company we use allows us a certain amount of data to put out a month. The shows ran kind of long this month, and we find ourselves out of space this month. This episode was originally 2 hours long. The space that we had left wasn't enough to fit all that, so what we did was edit it down to where we can put the first half here, and we're going to put the second half on our YouTube channel. There'll be a link in the description that'll take you right there, so you guys don't miss anything. Again, we deeply appreciate you guys sticking with us. We have the best goddamn listeners in the world. We appreciate you guys very much. You're all handsome, you're all beautiful, you're all smart, you smell good. You're talented and outspoken and wonderful and truthful, honest, supportive, and don't shit your pants. If you do, that's okay. I'm not going to tell you what ripe age I've last shit my pants at, but that's just another story for another podcast. Yeah, we were having weird weather here too. Like the start of this week, it was like 78 degrees, and on Wednesday we had hail.
Wow.
And today it was back up to like 72 degrees. It's been like that for 2 or 3 weeks.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that just due to changes in the environment, or is there something else going on?
I don't know. The weather's been wacky here. Even my weather app.
It's almost like Mother Nature's pissed.
Yeah, it's just acting out. My weather app is completely wrong all the time. It'll say there's no chance of rain, and then it'll be like 9 o'clock at night out all day because it's raining so hard.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's the global climate shift. It's we get these extremes in the peaks, and they're only becoming sort of more steeper.
It seems that way. It seems to be getting worse every year too.
Yeah, we've noticed that the last couple of years that the extremes of the weather phenomena are becoming more and more exaggerated.
You know, I saw an interesting picture the other day, and I've been waiting for a picture like this to come out. It was actually a video to where this dude was in LA filming this airplane leave a chemtrail, and there was another airplane kind of not crossing its path directly, but going the opposite direction that wasn't leaving a chemtrail. So
yeah.
I was like, look at that.
I don't know. I mean, there's the part of me that, wants to believe in that, but the other part of me that's skeptical as well. But you see what the governments do. They are into some shady stuff.
But the thing with the chemtrail that gets me, and this is the biggest reason why I don't understand the whole chemtrail thing. If it's nefarious and it leads to some negative effects, whoever's behind it has to live on the earth as well. Like they're affecting their family. They're breathing it in. They're not walking around with a fucking gas mask on the whole time. So it's affecting their loved ones and them as well, just as much as it is for us.
I don't know. I saw a great conspiracy piece, and there was very little evidence to back up this article, but it was just along the lines of, because I say so and I know this is going on. The suggestion that on the one hand, the elite are being given medication to circumvent the effects of all the toxins and stuff that is being put into the atmosphere. And also, that they are building and developing these bunkers so that when the apocalypse scenario happens and there is what's thought to be a big population control experiment coming up, that these guys can go into their bunkers and just ride it out for however long it's going to take, be it sort of 50 or 100 years. And I think a lot of people are looking at sort of perhaps the pandemic side, and the chemtrails are being used to inhibit natural immuno reactions, and these guys can just go into their bunkers, take their pills, and just ride it out and let the population crash, ready for sort of a soft reset in 50 to 100 years time. And on the one hand, that does sound quite wacky and tinfoil hat brigade, but when you actually start to look at the metrics of it, it does stack up, and that's kind of quite worrying.
Yeah, it's becoming more believable as time goes on. There's a lot of conspiracy pages that I look at, and there's this one dude who says that there's this one of these bunkers that they're building. These underground bunkers for the elite that theory's been going around for a long time. But this guy always said that this one was over here, and then he caught footage of this truck moving all these like plastic bins, these black plastic bins, and he was able to identify it in the video and found it online and purchased it. And it's basically like almost like a quick disposable type casket.
Really?
Yeah, they're like a foot and a half tall, and he lays down in it, and he says they're taking him. He films it, goes on Google Maps and shows you they're driving him over there and they're dropping him off there. So even like the evidence of these weird underground bunkers, not like military underground bases, but just like emergency bunkers for whoever, there's.
That's the thing.
And there's a lot of stuff that has come out that's been declassified, like the Raven's Nest, for instance, and that's way back on an episode we did with a guy we called AD. He was talking about this bunker that he came across. He used to be in the military, and he had security clearance, and he was a truck driver afterwards. And military bases needed someone to pick up a load to be destroyed, and they needed someone who had military security clearance, and it just so happened that he did. So he goes to this place, and it's in Pennsylvania, and basically the entrance is in the side of a mountain, and it goes underground, and it's called the Raven's Nest. But what it was designed for was during the Cold War, for the Pentagon. If bombs were to fall on Washington, D.C., and the top people in the Pentagon needed to go somewhere and evacuate, this was the place where they would go and then plan the military action from the Raven's Nest.
And was that still under military control? Had that passed to private enterprise?
I believe that was under government control, but
okay.
With all of this, the secret stuff with the military, the private industry always has a hand in it.
Very much so. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing more and more, that obviously our governments are so strapped for cash, and the US and the UK are technically bankrupt, the amount of debt that those countries are carrying, and the government is actively offloading these kind of sites. They're stripping all the equipment out, but then turning it over to private enterprise. And the guys, and we've talked about him before, the guys like Robert Bigelow and these kind of mega wealthy people, billionaires, are putting their own equipment into these places. And you start to see the equipment lists and what's happening in them, and you think this is just an ark. It's just a safe place to ride out several years of environmental instability.
Yeah, and just imagine if something like that does happen, since it's privatized, they can just basically say when some type of, cold winter happens or some type of nuclear winter, they're just like, so how much you guys want to pay for a room?
Exactly.
In this Coliseum-sized, underground bunker.
Yeah. And it's, we start off that when you paint the broad strokes on this, it does sound crazy, it does sound wacky, and then you start to get into the detail of who is doing what and why, and it becomes a little bit more believable.
Yeah, just easy enough for the government to respond when they got to act in like an emergency situation. And we don't have preparations for this. We don't have these bunkers and underground bases to keep people anymore. It's because they've sold them all off to rich people.
Yeah, exactly. And there's always someone who will have the finance in place to be able to buy these and do what they want with them. But you just look at the world stage at the moment, and you've got the likes of North Korea and the friction with China and everything going on. It's a pretty tense time, and it really wouldn't take a lot for things to escalate. It probably would only take a single tweet for things to get really out of hand.
Yep, that's the situation these days.
Yeah, it is. It is. But yeah, that's the world that we live in, as crazy as it all is.
Yeah, new tension in new places, more tension in old places.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it really wouldn't take much to ignite it. But also, you look at who all the competing organisations are, particularly sort of in energy fields, in water fields, even in grain. The amount of competition, and you think if everyone actually put profit aside and work together, so much could be achieved. But it all comes down to the dollar value,
Yeah, and it just seems like a bad episode of The Twilight Zone. It's just, that's just what it's going to end up being. They're going to hold out for the dollar, even though they might potentially die too. They're just going to literally grab the dollar to their grave.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've got a different theory about that, and because if you look at the Georgia Guidestones, for instance, so they say that the population of Earth needs to be brought down to like 500,000 or 500 million, so 500 million people, and that's wiping out, like what, 75%, well, more than 75% of the population. So
yeah,
they're wiping out a huge part of the population according to these Guidestones. But then it's saying live in balance with nature. So it seems like that this whole capitalist system was designed from the beginning to fail. So you've got and with the fall of the dollar, you're going to reduce everyone to the same level unless you're already in power. So unless you've got a power structure built around you, you're going to fall as well, regardless of how much money you have once the dollar falls. So you're going to have all these millionaires who think they're big shit because they're millionaires, but when the dollar falls, they're completely powerless.
No, I don't
find that out real quick.
I don't think they're going to be completely powerless though, because if the value of the dollar drops, it's going to hit the people, like the average person who has $300 in the bank. If the dollar slips to the value of a quarter, they're still going to have more quarters than us.
Yeah, I mean they're gonna, but they're not going to be as powerful. They're not going to have all the resources anymore because they're using. And especially when you've got all these people who are worth this amount of money, but they don't have that, like their money's tied up in the stock markets and bonds and all that. So if the value of the dollar falls, all their shit's going to tank with it. They won't have that to draw from anymore. And then they'll just have with what they're left with in their fucking houses, and maybe some of them prepared for that eventuality. Maybe some didn't, but that's going to reduce the population. Once that dollar collapses, it's going to be everyone. It's going to become every man for himself. Law of the jungle.
Very much so. I think a lot of it will depend on these people who are mega wealthy. Like you said, if they're going to have money in the stock market and then that money's just going to go. It's only ever theoretical money. But if they've invested in infrastructure and assets in a kind of very fixed and hard kind of way, then maybe they've kind of got a Walking Dead citadel that they can look after and what have you. And a lot of the equipment will be going into these bunkers ready for that time that they can sort of come out and start to manufacture these sites properly.
It makes me, when we always talk about thinning the herd or calling the population, I always think of a game that was called Homefront. And they just picked some, make-believe country to be the bad guys, but they made them seem like Russians, and they just bomb New York City with fighter jets, and they take over the TV, and they're like, look how bad the American people are suffering. Nobody has a fucking job. Crime is crazy everywhere. The government's fucking them over. and they just took it upon themselves to, quote, liberate the people of the United States. I wonder if we'll get a reaction like that if they do start some just goddamn Illuminati thinning the herd, just putting people in these concentration camps. I wonder if another country will be like, hey, we got to stop that. You know,
no way. They're going to be like, oh, America's getting what it deserves for sticking its dick all over the world.
But see, if you diminish a lot of the population, that's a lot of the military personnel that's gone too. I'm sure they're not going to be the first people to go, but there's a lot. I think there's a lot of people who are waiting for something like that as a good time to strike.
I wouldn't put it beyond the realms of possibility. There was a bit of disaster scenario that I was reading over the last couple of weeks, and it was reflecting on Syria and America. And obviously America launched tactical strikes following the chemical poisoning of civilians and refugees by the ruling regime in Syria. And some people pointed out that what was going on in Syria was no worse than what was going on with the Dakota pipeline and the way that the US authorities have been gassing and putting chemicals all over the protesters there.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, you've got America standing up for world rights whilst simultaneously denigrating those rights on its own civilians. And it wouldn't take much for a superpower, be it Russia or China, and bear in mind things with China are getting very, very difficult now because of the beginning of the trade wars, for them to say, actually, we are going to liberate these people, and how dare the White House approve the use of chemical attacks on its own civilians, and da-da-da. And it almost becomes an inversion of what's going on in the Middle East.
Yeah.
You know,
that whole quagmire in the Middle East it's all the U.S. That's the whole reason all that stuff is going on is because of us. You know, we took out Saddam, who was keeping the region stable, and we took him out. Then the civil war erupts in Syria. You've got the influx of ISIS, whom we were arming in Syria but fighting in Iraq. And then this chemical attack stuff happens when there's pretty significant evidence to show that this was a rebel group that did the chemical attack and not the Assad regime. Yeah. It wouldn't make any sense. He was winning the civil war to begin with. You know, he was beating back ISIS when they were kicking our ass all over the place. And he was the Syrian army was winning. Why would he then go and do a chemical attack knowing the effect that would have on his standing globally? You know, especially with all the dead kids that have been shown as a result of the chemical attacks. Like, people see dead kids and instantly they want retribution. They need this guy taken down. It's just pawns in a fucking game.
It is.
I got a buddy who's in the military who runs some Instagram page to where he puts all the weird propaganda videos, and there's some footage from Syria to where the supposed Syrian soldiers, you know, just slaughtered this town, just shot everybody up, rounded everybody up and killed them. You know, and I wrote, oh man, that's terrible. I hate seeing that shit. And he's like, dude, I'm glad you feel that way, but I'm just going to point this out. And he stops the video and he's like, that's not a Syrian soldier outfit. He has the wrong boots on. He has no insignia or patches. It's just some guy in some camo type clothes. He's like, we don't know what's happening over there, even with these videos. So who knows? That's the scary part. That could have been just a bunch of people impersonating Syrian soldiers or you know, vice versa.
Did you see the theory about ISIS? This has been out for a couple of years about the relationship between ISIS and Israel. Did you guys hear that one?
I have heard that.
So for the benefit of Matteo and anyone else listening, I've got buddies who are in the Air Force, and some of them now are quite senior. And this was maybe a year or two ago that we were just out and, you know, guys talking. And one of the senior guys, he reckons that ISIS, in terms of its leadership, is actually covert Mossad agents, and who have basically started up with American funding the ISIS group and the ISIS franchise. And the reason that this is being sort of directed by Israel is because it gets all the Middle East to fight amongst themselves and leave Israel the hell alone while they do their thing in Palestine.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. And There's also ties to Israel with the 9/11 stuff as well.
Yeah, I heard
for
that as well.
similar reasons. But yeah, because really they benefit from the region being destabilized, because if they get if Syria is stable, they're allies with Iran, and Iran and Israel clearly don't see eye to eye on things with the treatment of the Palestinians in Israel.
Yeah.
And by destabilizing Syria, you're taking away an ally of Iran, and then you're making it so that the threats against you are reduced. And then this whole thing with the nuclear program, and they can't have a nuclear bomb because they're the biggest purveyors of terrorism in the Middle East. But there's never, since like all this Al Qaeda and ISIS stuff has happened, that's not coming from them. That's coming from Afghanistan, from Saudi Arabia, from Iraq, and we're just pointing the finger at them. And the reason is because in the region, Israel is the only country that has a nuke.
Yeah.
And if another country in the region has a nuke, that levels the playing field. You can't have a level playing field. Israel above all.
It's interesting to hear it in that kind of context. I guess something that I've been very interested in is the predominance and influence of the military industrial complex, and the rise of that really since the late 50s and early 60s, and all the weird and wacky things. And certainly in the UK, so much of the UK's budget goes on, quote, defense, which is, military spending and the like. And I just wonder, what is the end game for the military industrial complex in this area? What do you think, Mike?
World domination. I think that they are at the upper levels being controlled by these elites. They've worked their way into all aspects, and that's why you see such a close relationship between the military and industrial complex and the governing bodies of countries. And they're tied together, and they can't be separated at this point because of the state of war in our world today. Either your country becomes a part of this war machine, or you get run over by this war machine.
Yeah. I think what's certainly interesting and has come out in the last week over in the UK, that the UK joined the US recently in strikes on Assad and what have you. And I think it was quoted that the UK spent £60 million in missiles on the Assad regime. Now, ultimately speaking, £60 million is a drop in the ocean. It's not that much amount of money. But what's really interesting is that the husband of our prime minister is a majority shareholder in the missile manufacture company.
Weird, isn't it? Just like Dick Cheney was involved with the war in Iraq.
Exactly. They're not even hiding it anymore. It's just blatant and out there. And you sort of think, how much more money do you guys need? I mean, this husband is a billionaire in his own right. He runs hedge funds and all kind of high net asset value kind of stuff. But how much more money do they need? And it's constantly just eroding away. 60 million here, 100 million there, and suddenly we're into the billions.
Yeah, I saw some numbers put up about how much the U.S. spent on bombing Syria, bombing those chemical plant sites, and I think with like 1/7 of the cost, they could fix the dirty water in Flint, Michigan. They don't even try.
To me, it's mind-boggling that the Flint situation is still going on.
It makes no sense.
I wonder if there's something else going on with that pipeline, or if there's something else going on in that area with the land and what have you.
I'm thinking that you're onto something there, because that's inexcusable. Especially in this country where we boast of being one of the richest countries in the world, despite the fact that we're infinity dollars in debt at this point. There's there's no light at the end of that tunnel. It's deep and dark and all the way to hell. But the fact that we've got people in our country that are living like they're in a third world country is inexcusable.
To me, it goes even beyond that this isn't an accident of circumstance. This just hasn't happened. This has been planned and prepared for. They are, Flint is intentionally without clean water.
Yeah. And it's to test something. Like they did it in St. Louis in the 40s or 50s with toxic gas. They used it on poor areas of St. Louis, and it was declassified a few years ago that actually happened. But these people were unwillingly experimented on for military purposes with the okay of our government.
Yeah, and it's not an isolated case either. I mean, MK Ultra ran for 20, 25 years with the full knowledge
experiments.
Yeah, we've had similar experiments in the UK. We've got a very large medical research facility called Portman Down, and for nearly 50 years they were allowed to experiment, human live experiments on people who were incarcerated and who had very serious mental health issues, and they were allowed just to go to town on these people.
Yeah, I just can't help think of how stories come out of Hurricane Katrina survivors about how bad things got and how long it took them to get help. It means most people didn't even really get help. I don't know. I don't remember what I was listening to, but it was somebody talking about how it's hard for them to go do shows over there. I forget if they're a musician or a comedian or something, but you don't hear about it, just like you don't hear about how bad their water is in Flint. I just recently saw a picture of somebody pour a cup of water from their sink, get water from their sink, and you're just like, how is that? How are they not receiving any help? And then you hear about how there's people over there that have dirt floors in their houses, from Hurricane Katrina. You're like, what? Are you kidding me? You just don't hear about it. They don't let you know about how bad it is.
I saw a story about Katrina, and a lot of the people, this was probably 2 years ago now, but a lot of the victims of Katrina were, especially in parts of Louisiana and Florida, were still without their houses weren't repaired. They were still living in like temporary homes or group homes or whatever. And they were interviewing them. I think it was Abby Martin who was she's great. If you guys have never seen the stuff that she does, she's fucking incredible. But she was doing a piece about the victims of Katrina, and they were saying how, once the news stopped covering it, everyone just ignored it. But to them, it's still going on. It's an ongoing thing. They're still suffering from it, and nobody gives a shit because they're not getting attention anymore.
Yeah. I mean, you've just got to look at the situation. Is it in Puerto Rico? So
that's what I was just going to say. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah.
Because there's reports of the Navy actually blocking people from going in there to fucking help. What does that mean?
It's criminal. There's no other word for it. I mean, these people don't even have stable power. And, this is, all right, I appreciate it's off the coast of the mainland, but it's still a state of America, sort of all legally incorporated. And they've just been left to it. And that, to me, that's just mind-boggling. It's like, yeah, you guys are suffering. We know that. Suffer some more. It's incredible.
Yeah, I have some family over there, albeit I'm out of touch with them, but I wish I was in touch with them to have a little bit of inside information on what's actually happening over there. I mean, I remember when all the videos hit the internet of people in schools and workplaces cheering because they got power, and it was months afterwards, and I was like, oh shit, I forgot about that. They've just been sitting there with no fucking power on the whole island this whole time.
Well, during the week, the week just gone, I'm not sure if it was accidental or deliberate, but the entire island was without power again.
Oh wow!
Because I think the infrastructure, such as it is so fragile that it can just go down, and so the entire island went without power. And you're like, that is absolutely insane. It's crazy that can happen in the 21st century.
I actually know someone who's they work for a private electrical company, and they were over there for 4 months trying to get things back online.
Wow. What if it's just a test to see the reaction on a populace when the shit hits the fan?
Yeah.
That's a good, I mean, and it's on an island, so people can, and it's a relatively poor island as well. And so to test it there first and then just blame it on the fact that they're a poor country.
That's exactly what Trump did, though, didn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, when it all started going down, he said that the infrastructure was already weak and already crumbling. And, maybe it's because, Puerto Rico isn't his core demographic. I imagine he's, probably quite anti-Puerto Rico. But it's, the fact is that the U.S. establishment has been allowed to get away with this.
Yeah. And they're going to continue to get away. Like, it's going to take literally the entire world standing, like the UN kicking us out and going against us. And even then.
I mean, these sort of bodies, I do question how effective they are. Yeah. I because you've got sort of the 5 permanent members of the UN Council of the Security Council who can just veto what should be good works if it's not politically in their interests. And you get that happening all the time with the US, with Russia. The UK is big on it as well. And it's so hard for the other countries to get stuff done because of this.
Yeah. And that's another thing with the way that all of these bodies are set up as a bureaucracy. Then you can't hold any one individual accountable.
No. And that's the beauty of the paper pushers.
Yeah.
I mean, we've just had a major scandal over in the UK. Have you heard of the Windrush scandal?
No, I have not.
Okay, so what this is that during the late 40s and 50s, the UK, opened its doors to immigration, and we took a lot of immigrants from Jamaica. And they're called the Windrush generation because that was the name of the first ship that came in and delivering these immigrants who were basically for manual labor, because after the war, we didn't have enough plumbers and carpenters and electricians and all this kind of stuff to rebuild the infrastructure. So effectively, we imported it. And the deal was that this generation could then stay in the UK and, make their fortunes and all kind of what have you. You skip forward 50 years and we're now into the age of austerity, and there's been a heavy clampdown on illegal immigrants and illegal benefit claimants and this kind of stuff. And what broke in the news this week was that this Windrush generation, they were being threatened, having spent all their lives in the UK, with being deported because they couldn't prove that they had the right to stay. And what had been used before was their boarding passes for the boats that they were on and what have you, except in 2009, as part of a clearing exercise, all the paperwork got shredded. So all these people who have contributed to the UK, who have paid their taxes, suddenly there isn't any paperwork now to say that they're legal, and they're being threatened with deportation back to Jamaica, regardless of whether the fact they had ties there or not. And what came out was that it wasn't the current administration, it was the administration before who are now in opposition. And the entire thing was basically just a glorified finger pointing exercise whilst these people suffered.
Wow.
Yeah, that's fucked up.
It is, but it happens, all the time in America. It happens all the time in Russia and China, as well. And you do sort of think, how long can this go on that you can keep treating people like this before you get a spark that ignites the flame?
But the thing is, it's always the people that they do a really good job of. Yeah. Demonizing and marginalizing. And so it's if they rise up and in revolt of the way you're treating them, then you're just kind of supporting what they're saying. Like, look, these people are animals, they resort to violence and completely ignore the way that they were treated, like the Black Lives Matter movement that's going on now.
Yeah.
And people just completely missing the message and being like, well, white lives matter too. No one is saying that they don't matter. What they're saying is that black lives matter.
Yeah.
Like
So,
they're because black lives matter does not mean that white lives do not matter. It's not a one or the other.
what amazes me is how blinkered some people's vision can be. I mean, we've got a major problem in the UK at the moment with our food supply chains. And what happens is just over 18 months ago, the UK made the decision to leave the European Union as part of a national referendum. And what has now become apparent is that the UK was dependent on EU migrant labour for the purposes of picking and packing on farms and small cooperatives and this kind of stuff, because it's a dirty, hard job and the pay isn't much. But the EU migrants were able to send the money home and it was suited them quite well. Now, with the decision to leave the EU, the migrant labour isn't coming to the UK anymore. And I know of farmers who are not that far from me who have enough food to feed 15,000 families, but they can't get the labour in to pick and pack it, and the vegetables are just rotting in the fields.
Oh man!
And this is happening all over the UK. It's not isolated. And when we leave the EU next March, that's going to be a real make or break for this country, because we're suddenly going to have to either import a hell of a lot more money or pay a lot more for the local labour to take it up. But either way, you're going to see a big spike in food prices.
And that's another thing, the high cost of food and healthcare.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the American healthcare system, I can't
oh my
even
God.
get
It's terrible.
I saw a leaked memo, and I'm trying to remember who it was from. I think it was from Goldman Sachs. There was a leaked memo, and the exact wording in it is curing patients an affordable business model?
Yeah. And that's half the reason why cannabis is still federally illegal. Even though the minority leader, Chuck Schumer, was introducing a bill today to, for those listening, we're recording this on 4/20. So he was introducing a bill today to federally decriminalize cannabis.
Do you think
not legalize it, but I don't know, because we've got there's a lot of people on the Republican side that are very ignorant to it, but there's a lot that are coming around too. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, from what I've seen it in various states, it's been a good form of tax revenue that they've been able to put into schools and infrastructure and that.
Well, I can say just for New York State, because I recently got my medical certification, and just to be certified, it's $200 for the first year. You have to pay that direct to the government just to get the government certification for medical cannabis.
And what does this certification allow you to do? To buy or to grow?
Not growing, and they still haven't legalized the plant yet. So for medical patients, you can get there's a few different methods that you can go on.
And get this, California friends, listen to this, because for us, we can grow and buy, and they used to have it to where you can grow at home and then sell like product back to dispensaries. So we have everything here in California: fucking candy, soda, lip balm, massage oil.
It's legal recreationally for you as well.
Yeah, but even before that, they had all that shit. We were allowed everything. And listen to this.
And the medical thing, the medical certification over there, from what I've heard, is pretty much a joke.
Yes, it is.
Like, you walk in there and be like, "Oh, I've got a stomach ache. Oh, here's some weed. Thank you." But here I had to go. So it's a super long process. I had to go see my doctor. Then my doctor had to refer me to a spine and wellness center. So I had to go to the spine and wellness center for a consultation with their head nurse. And then if she thought that I was a good candidate for the program, then she referred me to a doctor who could actually prescribe it. So then I had to go to so it was 3 appointments total. And then I had to pay a $200 fee direct to the government to get certified. And then they send me the card and I can go to the dispensaries. Now at the dispensaries, they don't even have weed at the dispensaries. What they have is they just introduced a 5th product recently. But they had prior to, actually it was released today, I believe. But prior to today, they had a pill you could take, which was basically hash oil in a capsule. They have cartridges for a vaporizer pen. You can get mouth spray or a tincture. Nothing that you can smoke.
Okay.
That's
and
just
today
bizarre
they just
to hear.
yeah. Today they just released a powder that you can put in drinks and mix it up. And like a drink mix, a weed drink mix. So it's very strange because they've got all these products that they have to manufacture from the plant, but you can't get the plant itself. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand it. And to top it all off, it's super expensive. For just 15 pills, it's $55.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I could get a quarter of weed for that much money, and that'll last me a week.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And why is New York being so resistant when you've got the likes of California who are sort of blazing a trail?
Well, what's even weirder is right next door in Massachusetts. It's legal recreationally. And we were so late. The weird thing is, like, the area that I live in, all the governments are pussies, and neither one wants to jump unless the surrounding states are also jumping as well. So They just so we were kind of the last ones to get on board. New Jersey and Massachusetts, they already had medical things in place, and we just got on board, I think 2 years ago, and they've just recently changed the laws, because it used to be you had to have a terminal illness like cancer or a debilitating illness like MS or something along those lines, like something really serious in order to get it. But they've changed it now so that they're offering it for people with chronic pain and things like that. So, but it's not like California where you just go in and the doctor doesn't even look at you and he's just like, well, whatever. He's got his fucking earbuds in the whole time. He just signs your paper.
I'll tell you guys that the last time I renewed my license, there was not even a doctor there. I talked to an iPad on Skype to a doctor that wasn't even on site.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And I wasn't in there. I timed it this time. I was out of there in less than a minute.
That's interesting. How long has California had these sort of liberal weed laws?
I'm not sure. There's people I've known who's had their cards for 10 years, but I don't know if that's the more terminal people like Mike was talking about, but just, I don't know. I've gotten my license since 2013 maybe. And even the very first time I went, it's it's great that we have this ability. It's great. I'm appreciative. Don't get me wrong, but there's 18-year-olds in there laughing, talking on their cell phone, who say they have a bum knee. I mean, I've gone in there one time and I explained, this neck injury here, not being able to sleep, and or not being able to sleep. That's what I left out. And the doctor's just sitting there looking at me, basically like, dude, shut up. And I'm like, okay. And he goes,
shut up. I'm giving you this paper.
Yeah. He's like, I don't care. He's like, can you sleep? And I'm like, I have trouble with sleep. He's like, okay, here you go. He's literally waiting for me to say that. And when I didn't, he spurred me to say that I can't sleep. And as soon as I said it, he signed a paper. He's like, have a good day. They don't care. They want their $45 a pop. It's a joke in a lot of places. I know. I mean, like, I have friends who where they go to get their license and their renewals, it's a straight up doctor's office. They take your blood pressure, they examine what you're complaining about. But there's a lot of places. I mean, you can get your license now for $30 in some places. They don't care. And it's because they're making money on it, which is good. It's a huge income. Like, the taxes on this shit out here is ridiculous. Like, if you have your medical card in California, since they made it legal recreationally, you get spared the tax that goes on to all that shit. So, they raised it like let's say my shit was $20, now it's 21. But if you don't have your medical license, you're paying $56.
Wow.
So all these people are rushing to go get their med cards, and they haven't smashed down on any of the regulations. You just got to go in there and say you can't sleep.
And Matteo, what's the narrative over there? Is everyone just cool with the weed, or is there a push to decriminalize the likes of MDMA and mushrooms? Is there a more progressive narrative going on?
Yeah, there's a lot of people talking about that. We had a lot of problems with post-traumatic stress disorder with poor guys that go fight wars, and they're talking about MDMA's benefits for that and all that stuff. And it's funny to me, like I had my medical license when they legalized it. It didn't fucking change anything for me. But now that it's legal, you got to keep some class to it. I mean, there's certain places where you can do that shit, but there's people walking around with bongs out here, just walking down the street. Yeah, and dude, cops drive by, they don't care. It's accepted by everybody. But I've seen store signs say, if you have a strong scent of marijuana, we're going to ask you to leave.
Okay.
Yeah, but for the most part, nobody cares. People just walk down the street smoking joints now.
That's quite cool.
Yeah.
I mean, the UK had a very brief experimentation with they decriminalized cannabis in one area. It was an area called Brixton, and lo and behold, the crime rate dropped and everyone was a lot more chilled out and what have you. But I think then after 5 years, they then rolled back. And it's still a crime to have it, still a crime to sell it, still a crime to smoke it.
That doesn't make sense. On what context did they roll it back?
The government that we've got in at the moment is very authoritarian. They don't really make any secret that they're trying to privatize our police force. They're bringing in more and more private security into the military, and they're just a very authoritarian government. The opposition is quite weak, in all fairness. They're not really cohesive. There's a lot of infighting amongst the opposition, and it lets the government just do whatever the hell they want. And I think because they haven't monetized it yet in any sort of way that's gone on in California and other US states, they are just not seeing it as a priority issue.
Man, but I mean, even to not see it as a priority issue, but to actually go out of your way to roll the rules back to the way they were, that seems like more effort than just letting it stay the way it was.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the current government is very intransigent. If they get an idea, it doesn't matter what evidence that you put in front of them, they're just not interested.
Well, I guess if it was on the federal level, then it would have been, they don't want the this one area is showing that weed can actually be beneficial. So stop that before the other areas get the idea in their head, and then we have a full-scale epidemic.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it was this week I was reading an article about Canada that the Canadian Prime Minister has just pardoned everybody in prison who was in there on a weed offense.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Even here in states where it's now legal, they still haven't done a pardon on a lot of people that were there for. Yeah, and this isn't even for dealing offenses. This is people that were arrested for possession offenses, and they're still there.
Do you think it's coming, or do you think it's still a way off?
And I mean, in some places, it is. It's up to the governor. But if they're making money off these inmates, then and especially with most of them being nonviolent inmates, where there's no real risk in among the guards or the other inmates having these people there, why not keep them there and continue to collect the revenue?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, that America has really made prison into a profit. It's something not really that the UK has got into, but it's slowly getting there.
We have privatized prisons here.
Yeah,
where the government isn't even involved. They issue the punishment, and then it's left to some private corporation to make sure that the punishment is fulfilled.
Yeah,
I don't see
bizarre.
I don't see any pardoning even over here in California. I don't know. Was it Sessions saying a few months ago that marijuana was as bad as heroin? I mean, they literally don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
He's an idiot.
Yeah.
He is a fucking idiot.
But I mean, you see that all the time, and sort of in the UK, we follow the congressional hearings quite closely. When they had Mark Zuckerberg in, was it last week or the week before?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Congress. They just rolled over and were giving him the easiest time possible. And then I think when it got bumped up to a Senate hearing, then he got a harder time on it. But you do see so many politicians on both sides of the water not really knowing a clue of what they're supposed to be doing.
I'm glad there's some places like Massachusetts and California that just said, fuck it, let's see what happens, And you see crime drop and they make a whole shit ton of money. I mean, that's what they need now. I was reading some report on Twitter the other day about how there's this dude who is manufacturing and selling coke, I think, and he was taking payments in Bitcoins, and he got busted, and the police seized all his money. They seized his Bitcoins, but I think like a year after all the legalization and paperwork of trying to prosecute this guy, they went and looked back at his Bitcoins, and it had quadrupled, and they're like, holy shit, this is an asset. And they literally told this guy, once you give us these Bitcoins legally, and we'll knock down your sentence a little bit. And it's weird to see them, they're stealing a drug dealer's money.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, well.
But that's gone on for years, hasn't it? That sort of, that there would be these law enforcement officers who would bust a drug dealer. They would then pocket his money and then sell on his gear onto another drug dealer, and so on and so on and so on. And that's been, I mean, I'm aware of stories of that from the 50s and the 60s of that going on. And again, the
it's
UK
still going on.
Oh God, yeah.
It's. I mean, there's why are American soldiers guarding poppy fields in Afghanistan? Yeah. If we really thought that the heroin and the opium epidemic was as dangerous as we thought, why aren't we burning those fields? Because we're guarding the fields from the fucking Taliban so that the Taliban doesn't burn it, because they don't want them.
Yeah.
They don't want the drugs.
But I mean, the war on drugs was only ever a phony war, because war is profitable. It was only ever a phony war. And you just got to see what's going on in Mexico at the moment to see that. And I mean, the Mexican situation's been that for 10 years at least.
You can trace it back even farther than that to really the 80s when the cartel started getting involved in cocaine.
Yeah, and I mean, we infrequently see articles over here of the opioid epidemic that's going on in the US, and so the high level of mortality rate that's associated with that, and the reason that the opium is being brought in from Afghanistan or what have you is that it pays for it to happen. It's a profitable industry.
Yeah, it's weird to see all these Xanax overdoses and these deaths from people taking Xanax. And Jesus Christ, you can go on Instagram and see people with Xanax pills tattooed on their face. I don't understand why it's such a big thing now. I was prescribed Xanax before I was a teenager. I didn't like them. I didn't take them. But it's always been around. I wonder why this big, huge rush of Xanax. You can get a Percocet pill that's way better than taking a fucking Xanax.
I think it's because now kids doctors are so quick to prescribe ADHD medicine or anxiety medicine or painkillers because it's profitable for them as well. And that's also part of the reason why cannabis prohibition continues, is because if cannabis was legal and everybody had access to it, they're going to be receiving a lot of the benefits from that they get from this medicine, but they're not going to have the drawbacks that these medicines have, and they're not addictive like these medicines are. So even if people start taking this medicine, they're not going to be addicted for life and have to continually take it and make money,
Yeah, it was weird to see all the pushback. I mean, there's a lot of nerdy fucking people who do vape tricks all day, but just the pushback the government gave against vaping. It's finally something palpable that can help people stop smoking, and they're still trying to take that shit out. They're still fighting companies. Why do you need all these flavors for it. The American Heart and Lung Association just came out in support of vaping because it's so much healthier than smoking, and they're still trying to stop it. And they flagrantly do it for no reason. I mean, there's a school that they put up at my kid's middle school. It says no smoking, no tobacco products, including vape pens. There's no tobacco in my fucking vape pen. There's no tobacco in any of my things. There's nicotine in the juice, but it's not a tobacco product. But they've legally made it a tobacco product, even though there's no fucking tobacco in it. It's ridiculous. It's something that saves lives. It's proven to save lives. I mean, there's, like I said, the Heart and Lung Association are coming out in support of it, but the government's still saying, no, were they shutting down companies left and right? And then I just saw this big thing about how they're trying to make it so, nobody can have any flavor in their juice, which I can understand. It doesn't need to be fucking a billion flavors and shit like that. I can see what they're getting at. If something tastes like candy, that's going to want to make kids do it. But I mean, there's kids are getting their hands on cigarettes anyway, and they taste like shit. It's weird.
Do you think that we'll see sort of a move towards the other drugs now that sort of cannabis has sort of broadly been legaled?
I think some of them probably.
With the development of medical like benefits, I believe, just like you can't deny the benefits of cannabis now. There's so much, they considered it wish-washy science before, but now these kids that were in college, 10, 15 years ago, smoking weed every day, who graduated college, there's a bunch of people who become stoners and don't, but those people became scientists, and they're going, no, look, this shrinks cancer cells by 30%. It's undeniable. And you're starting to see a lot with psychedelics now, and how beneficial that is for people. So I think
I think psychedelics is going to be the next big push.
Yeah, me too.
I mean,
and especially with mushrooms, the breakthroughs that they found with PTSD patients.
Yeah.
And I recall reading somewhere as well that the guy who created the 12-step program wanted acid use to be included in there because that's what helped him beat alcoholism, was taking acid, because it kills your ego. And if you kill your ego, you can see your own flaws. And then it's all depending on what you take back with you from the other side of your trip. But if you're able to view yourself and your life without the filter of your ego and actually see things for what they really are, I think you're more inclined to be able to deal with that, whether it be PTSD or addiction or even depression.
I mean, there's certainly a lot to be said at the moment for the use of acid and mental health issues like depression and psychosis and these horrible diseases. Certainly, Mike and I have been talking sort of offline about sort of acid use in the health realms, and I think a lot of the old guard are very resistant to the idea, but some of the newer guys who are coming through are saying, well, actually, there is a body of evidence here, but it's so heavily regulated through the ethics and morals committees, and then it's almost impossible to get funding for it at the moment.
Yeah, I can see that. It's amazing that we're at today with some states in the United States with marijuana. I mean, they literally just took the chance of saying, if it's greed or not, maybe they're saying, fuck the pharmaceutical field. Look how much money these states are making off selling just weed. I mean, it's amazing that that's where we're at. But I mean, honestly, for them to move to psychedelics, that seems like such a far throw to me. Like maybe, like I said, I've never done psychedelics. Maybe that's why. But just like I don't know, Mike. Have you heard? I think it's Neil Brennan, the comedian, talk about his depression.
No, I haven't.
He suffered from pretty morbid depression, and he regularly does legal MDMA treatments, and that's great to hear. I'm glad they're finding stuff that helps, but man, I think psychedelic, that's a long shot. You can just see Nancy Reagan, fucking rolling around and screaming.
They've also showed the benefits of microdosing on acid. You take enough so that it's kind of affecting your brain chemistry, but not enough that it's going to make you trip. And it's able to help with your, basically your waking life when you're out dealing with things but it's also supposed to help with meditation and things like that because your brain chemistry is in a different state.
Yeah, I've heard similar things to that as well. There was an article not that long ago in one of the combat magazines that I read, and it was about a kickboxer, and he was microdosing before he was going into sparring, and he reckoned that not having a full trip but just having a little microdose made him a lot more intuitive towards other people, and he was able to read their body language a lot better, and he was a big fan of it.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I actually heard about that kickboxer. That's interesting.
It does make you wonder. I mean, I've never had a full trip in that kind of way, and it's something that I'm very interested in. But I think would be, I said, to slay the ego and promote meditation. There's a lot of work on the health benefits of meditation. Maybe in the next 10, 15 years, we might start to see something come forward that, like cannabis has been legalized, we'll see acid being legalized.
I mean, if it's as beneficial with mental health as they say it is, I hope so. I really hope so. There's people who, I mean, I've heard just stories of people that say that they've tried everything in the world. They've tried everything to beat depression and mental illness, and it's just like a magic trick. Boom, those psychedelics work for them.
Yeah, it's at the moment in the UK, it's very much a fringe field. Doesn't receive much funding, and it's quite hard to get any sort of survey or test approved. But the fact that there is at least the discussion going on, albeit at a very low level, does make me wonder if, we will see something coming out of it. I hope so.
I don't mind people walking around high, like we both said, all of us have said it. They're pretty chill, relaxed people. Crime rates drop, but I'd again, as being somebody who's never done that, I wonder what we'll see when there's a bunch of people tripping on acid. And like Mike, you said, microdosing maybe, but there's going to be abuse just like any other prescription.
If it becomes legal, they've got to put regulations on it, because you don't want that to become legal recreationally. Like decriminalized, sure, but you don't want it to be something that you can just go to the store and be like, you know what, I think I'm going to go buy and eat the mushrooms today. It should be done for medical purposes, and it should be something that's done with respect. I don't believe in taking psychedelics I used to take them recreationally and just for fun. But I don't believe in that. I haven't taken them in that way in probably close to 15 years. And you have a very different experience when you respect it and you take it with the intent to get something out of it instead of just sit there and act like an idiot and giggle. So I think if it were to be decriminalized, it would be better than being legal, and, make strong regulations. Like, you don't want people tripping and driving, or tripping and going to the supermarket even, or being around kids or any of that stuff. It's something that should be left in private, and it's not something that the public should be exposed to. And really, if you're going to use it, you need to use it with respect.
Mike, if you don't mind me asking, when you took it, what was your experience?
Well, it depends on the time, really. I mean, I'm pretty experienced with, more so with mushrooms. I have done acid a handful of times, but mushrooms, I've got a lot of experience with them. When I used to do them recreationally, typically it was just like you hear a lot of people talk about seeing things and seeing weird things, and I've taken some pretty big doses of mushrooms. Like 4 grams of mushrooms, and I know some people say you need at least 5 to really rocket ship off into another reality or whatever. I've never gone that high. I usually try to stick between 3 and 4 grams of mushrooms. But typically I would just laugh a lot. I cry, but like by cry, I don't mean like sobbing. I just mean my eyes will water. Think like if you laugh really hard and your eyes are watering.
Yeah.
It's like that, but it's I don't even have to laugh really hard. Like if I smile too much, my eyes will start to water.
Okay.
But it's that type of thing. It's kind of euphoric feeling. With mushrooms, it's a lot more of a body feeling as well. In addition to being mental. But a weird thing that happens with mushrooms, and I don't know if it happens with everybody. I do know that it's happened with other people that I've talked to, not everyone that I've talked to, but other people, and I've experienced this as well, but you hear your hearing increases dramatically.
Whilst you're on the trip or post-trip?
While you're on the trip.
Okay.
So one example, this will be an easier example to wrap your head around than my personal example. But one time my brother was taking mushrooms, and we lived in a small city of only 2,000 people. It's the smallest city in New York State. And but it's probably about 3 miles across from one end to the other. And he was on one end of the city, and he heard a party. He didn't know where it was, but he heard this party. So he ended up walking about probably close to 2 miles, and he had to cross over a bridge, go down this road, and he ended up finding this party of just some other kids, and it wasn't like it was a loud party. It was a regular party. They didn't have a live band, so it's not like the sound would carry that for 2 miles or however far it was. But he was able to hear it, and the sound guided him to this party. I've had experiences myself where I'll be walking down the street and I'll hear somebody flush their toilet inside their house. I've heard the sound, and this is going to sound really weird. And I know a lot of people will probably be like, oh, that's just because you were tripping and you were having auditory hallucinations, which it's a possibility, but I'm typically pretty well aware of my own mind while I'm tripping. Like, I've never had a situation occur where I'm like, is that real, or is that because I'm on mushrooms? Like, I still have a pretty decent grasp on what's real and what's not. But I was hearing this noise, and I don't know exactly what it was, but it was coming from the ground. And to me, it sounded like worms crawling through the dirt. Like if you think of like what a moist, like the moist dirt when you're like running your hands through it or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that kind of noise. And it was coming from the ground. So I mean, that's the only thing that I could think of that it was at the time, was it was worms crawling through the ground. But, like I said, it very well could have been an auditory hallucination, and I was just not aware that I was hallucinating. That being said, I've never hallucinated on psychedelics ever. Never seen things, never felt things that weren't there.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know, because I know a lot of people that have had
me too
visual experiences, and I have all the times I've taken mushrooms, which has been many, many times. Even when I've taken acid, I've never had hallucinations.
See, I had the experience of chilling with a band that I was in. Let's see, there's 3 other dudes in the band, and they all got together to do mushrooms. We all went to one dude's house, and I wasn't going to take any. And I was like the sober buddy, making sure everybody was all right. And that's one thing that trips me out about, and like you said, maybe not total legalization of something like that. I think that's probably a better idea, not to legalize something like that. One guy, they made smoothies out of orange juice and ice and put the mushrooms in there. And one guy went and laid outside. He laid against the house, face down in the dirt for about 3 hours. One guy was sitting there, and I told him, we'll just use the name Dave. I said, hey, Dave, are you okay? And he looked at me and screamed at the top of his lungs, why would you ask me that? Ran into a room and locked the door for 3 hours. And one guy sat on the couch and just laughed at a television that was off for 3 hours. And I was like, it was just a weird spectrum of all these different things. I mean, the guy who laid outside, I was like, are you okay? And he's like, oh yeah, I'm fine. But he was just laying face down in a pile of fucking dirt. I was like, all right, dude.
Sometimes you just find your spot and you're like, yeah, this is my spot that I'm gonna hang out in. And it's just like a safe space. Like you go to a place and I don't know how else to explain it, but to describe it as the energy feels right or feels comforting. And sometimes when you're in an altered state, you just need that place. You go to that place and then you feel comfortable, and that'll be enough. So that could be what he was dealing with, and it seemed weird to you because you just came up and saw him laying there, but it was he was probably just just feeling right about that place. It's like, I'm just gonna chill here for a bit.
That's hilarious.
Mike, do you ever think that you'll go back to it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I've gone back. I haven't in a couple of years. Last time I tried to take mushrooms, I ended up getting food poisoning. I don't think it was related to the mushrooms because my girlfriend took them as well. But for the next 2 days, I was very, very ill, and I was very unhappy and in a lot of pain. But that was probably 2 years ago. But yeah, I do plan on doing it again actually very soon.
Now, do you think
it's not anything I'm afraid of?
Do you think that all the talk of medical benefits of doing stuff like that will play a part in your trip when you do revisit?
Well, like I said, I used to do it recreationally, and as I got into my late 20s, and I decided if I was going to do them, for a while I would only want to do them by myself. I didn't want to do them with other people. I wanted to have my own experience and not have my experience be affected in any way by anyone else's experience or their energy or whatever might happen with them. So for a while I would do them by myself, like once a year. And I would, I'd go outside, I'd build a fire, I'd sit out by the fire and let the trip take hold. And I would just hang out there until the trip passed, and then I'd go to bed. And I use it in that regard, like as a means to expand my consciousness or to get inside my own head.
So you'll keep that in mind as you enter the experience?
Yeah. I always do it. And if I'm not if I'm not in the right state of mind, I won't do it. Even if like I had planned to do it, if there's something bothering me or I'm the least bit leery that something could take a turn, I won't even bother. Like I've got to be in a good mind state. Just because I've only had a bad trip once, but it was because I was not in a good mind state. And it started out all fun. This was when I was still doing them recreationally. It started out all fun. I was hanging out with this girl. She had never done them before. I had just come out of a breakup, and I was kind of seeing this girl, and we decided to do them together. It started fun. We were having a good time. She was a little freaked out by what she was experiencing because she worked in the mental health field, so she dealt with schizophrenics, and to her it felt like what her patients would describe when they were having issues with the schizophrenia, like whether they were seeing things or hearing things or whatever. And she said it led her to believe that maybe the schizophrenia is allowing them to see things on a different level than what we would see normally. And that she was on their level now because she took the mushrooms. So she was able to see things on this higher dimensional level. And so that, she, and that didn't make me turn at that point, but what made me turn was the stupidest fucking thing. And it later turned out that, what made me turn, I was trying to set up a DVD player, and I couldn't get this DVD player set up. It was a brand new DVD player. I couldn't get it set up. It was at her house on her TV, and I couldn't get it set up. And I became frustrated by that. And the frustration started to eat into my brain, and I'm like, you can't do this because you're fucked up, and you're too fucked up to be doing this stuff, and you did this to yourself, and now you're dealing with this. And that led me down a road to start. It led me down a dark road, and I started thinking about the breakup that I had just gone through, and I started thinking about how I hated my job and all the terrible things that were going on in my life. And that really, really brought me lower than I've ever been in my entire life. Like, I was super depressed. Like, it was a huge weight that was like on my consciousness. Everything just was very dark. Not even lighthearted music could get me out of it. Sex couldn't get me out of it. Nothing could pull me out of this. And finally, it's like a switch just flipped, and like around 5:30 or 6 in the morning, it finally passed and I came out of it. But that was the worst experience I've ever had. And I was very, very low, and I just wanted it to be done. And so for a while after that, that was actually the turning point that led me to understand that I can't just take this stuff recreationally, and I have to have respect for it, and I have to have a purpose if I'm going to take it. And so I've lived like that ever since. But it took me a few years to even give it another shot.
Wow.
Pretty ringing endorsement, right?
Anyway, guys, I've probably got to get out now because it's nearly 8 o'clock here in the UK, and I've got guys coming up onto the farm to do the work today.
Yeah. Well, thanks for getting up so early.
No, thank you, guys. Always good to chat.
Yeah.
Maybe next time we'll get to the
subject.
We'll get to the topic.
No, it's good to talk.
Yeah. I agree. Thank you so much, Martin, for coming on. And again, great to talk to you. Always is.
Thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Sure thing, man. Have a good night.
All right. Speak to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.